Hey everybody, it's Roland Millington here with the lowest note, and I just wanted to talk to you guys today a little bit about Squier basses, and more importantly, perhaps the prejudice against people who are playing with Squier basses. Squier basses, originally made by Fender, have been made in Japan, have been made in various parts of the Orient, have been pretty much well maligned for factory quality, and it's been a stigma that's been tough for them to wear off. However, with the Affinity line, it's kind of understandable. Those basses are made to a price point. They put them in a package with a very inexpensive amp and a very inexpensive strap and a very inexpensive cable, and then sell them for, whatever, $150, couple $100. It's really not surprising to find that people don't really end up thinking that Squier basses are worth a whole lot. And even though that there are a ton of videos on the web, really, if you look at it, that show that Squier basses actually are really not all that bad, it's still, for some players, the stigma, especially in their local scene, you play a Squier, so you're really not a serious musician unless you play a Fender like the jazz bass that I have back there. Now, this is a Squier vintage modified. It's made to resemble a 1970s jazz bass. A very good friend of mine out on the East Coast, Joanne Jaybird Phillips, giving you a shout out there, has actually a 70s jazz bass that looks exactly like this, with the exception of the headstock, where hers says Fender, mine says Squier by Fender. It has the black block inlays and the black binding, the black pick guard, the same, jazz bass spacing on the pickups. There are slightly different sizes in some of the pickups. Fender, for example, the Made in Mexico and the Made in Japan's and the Made in America's differ somewhat in the sizing of the treble pickup, and so that can make it a little bit difficult to make sure that when you're replacing the pickup, for example, if you wanted to put, like, I've got a set of Seymour Duncan quarter pounders in my jazz bass, for it to fit into that particular bass, because it was made to fit for an American, you had to do a little bit of shaving in the routing just to make sure that it'd clear in the treble pickup back here. The main problem with that, obviously, is string spacing, because you want, in a perfect world, the poles on your bass, as you're seeing them here, there's going to be a string run straight up between the poles, and it's going to hit at each and every one. Now, even on this jazz bass, it doesn't match up perfectly. If you look at the strings, where the string lines up on the G string and the string lines up on the E string, it's slightly off, and you can tell it's a little more biased towards the G string, whereas on the bridge pickup, the treble pickup, it's a little more in line. So you got to take it with a grain of salt. It's not the perfect storm, if you were, but if you were to want to set something up absolutely perfectly, but it works. The jazz bass has, just your average jazz bass controls. Of course, it's got the chrome dome knobs. That's another thing that Joanne's bass has, I believe, that mine doesn't have, is actual Fender pickup controls, yeah. And these are just chrome, which I'm not a huge fan. The problem is you can't at any given time see when you've rolled off the treble or rolled off the bass or rolled your tone in any way, shape, or form. So I really I'm not a fan of the knobs, although they are very high quality knobs. They're nice, they're knurled. There was a dimple or a divot that was easy to see in the top of these. It would be fantastic. Like my Yamaha has black knurled controls and a little white dot on it, makes it perfect to see. But this is kind of difficult, so they probably could have put a little more thought into the controls right down here. Everything else is nice. It's decent hardware. These are Duncan design pickups. I love the Duncan design stuff. These are, of course, not made by Seymour Duncan. They're Duncan designed. There is a difference there, but the pickups actually sound pretty good. In a couple seconds, I'm going to give you a little sampling of that. So there you have it. It's just your straight up standard jazz bass. It's nothing fancy. I mean, for the price tag, you really wouldn't expect a whole lot fancy. It's got a satin neck. It's maple. Not sure if it's one piece or two piece maple, but it certainly plays well. It's bright. The bodies are usually three piece, although there are some two pieces that were made. It's matched pretty nicely. Some of the wood is actually very attractive, although you see this big old knot hole here on mine. I don't really worry about that so much. It adds character to it. I know which bass is mine. If I were to see a pile of them sitting there, I'd know, hey, look at the knothole. At any rate, long story short, it's really a great playing bass. I've gigged out with this. It sounds great. It's got a ton of punch. It sounds, great when I'm using a synth, or when I'm using a distortion, or when I'm using any kind of effects. It does exactly what you'd expect a jazz bass to do. Does it sound like a Fender? No, not by a long shot. But that's not necessarily a bad thing, because a Gibson doesn't sound like a Fender, and a Tobias doesn't sound like a Fender. It depends on what you want in your toolkit. So just because it says Squier on the headstock, don't let anybody look down on it. I mean, for crying out loud, for the amount of money that I bought this bass for, if I was really concerned about the tone, it'd be very inexpensive to upgrade the pickups and to upgrade the tone controls. There's a ton of room in there. This is not routed out underneath of the pick guard. So if you were to actually put an active electronic or an active tone circuit in here, you would probably end up having to do a lot of routing in this area. But there's a ton of meat in that wood. You got plenty of room to do it, and it's very inexpensively priced. If that's really what you're looking is for something to do some Franken bassing with, perfect candidate here. Although it sounds fantastic on its own, and to be honest with you, the quality control capabilities of the Squier facilities have really stepped up a notch. There's a lot of people that think that they are on par with the Made in Mexico products as far as the Fender line of basses. It all depends on what you want, though. Sounds great. Played in, sounds wonderful. Get it set up. That's the key. If you are like most people and you're ordering it from a big box store, your best bet is going to be to actually pay somebody to set this bass up properly. But I did note that the nut spacing, the actual clearance at the first fret, it was all within spec. It's all certainly within reason. And the neck relief, once you get it all set, once you get the action set in this bass, it's a fantastic playing bass. Doesn't really matter if you're fingerstyle like me, playing with flat wounds, or if you've got really bright round wounds and you're going for that super scooped Marcus Miller kind of low end thump with a lot of snap to it. It's a great bass to have in your toolkit, and it's certainly giggable. So hope that helps you guys. Just because it says Squier on the headstock, don't thumb your nose at it. Don't look down at it. Don't think, it's not really a jazz bass. It's every bit of jazz bass. It's every bit of giggable jazz bass. So, hope that helps you guys. And in the meantime, keep it low.
Chop it up and recombine. Chop it up.